All right, welcome to Jimmy Gets Buckets Fishing. This video is from a few days after a full moon in July at the Cape Cod Canal. The canal had been loaded with bait and a lot of big fish. Let's get right into it. So this was about my 100th cast of the morning. It's 6:30 now. I'd been fishing since 4, and finally these fish that had been on the other side of the canal all morning finally pushed the bait towards the middle.
There we go.
And it didn't take long. So you might have noticed right after I set the hook on that fish, I took a couple steps forward. I was pretty much yanked off the rocks that I was standing on. I was standing on some pretty small, unstable rocks. So before you make a cast or set the hook on a fish up there, you want to be sure that you're standing on solid ground. Those rocks are very unstable. They're slippery. They're covered in barnacles, seaweed. So just be sure you're footing before you make a cast up there.
There we go. Double up. They've gotten a lot closer though.
So when you're fishing the canal, you want to make sure you're fishing pretty heavy drag. If you're fishing too light a drag, your fish is just going to get down in that current and it's just going to rip all your line off your reel. The fish is going to get swept way down current of you. It's going to cross dozens of people down current of you. And that's no good for anybody. If people are polite, like thankfully the guy to my left was, they're going to wait for you to get your fish out of the way before they make another cast. But I've seen plenty of times where people don't wait and they cross your line while you have a fish on. And that usually never ends well. You're going to lose your fish, your $30, $40 lure. And that's just not a good situation. So fish heavy drag at the canal. Another reason to fish heavy drag and try to get your fish in as quick as possible, and more importantly than those first reasons I talked about, is you don't want that fish to be completely exhausted by the time you get your hands on it. That's just for the well-being of the fish. What I noticed on this trip, which I haven't noticed before at the canal, is there was a lot of big gray seals around, unfortunately eating the large striped bass, like 30, 40-pound bass. I saw these massive gray seals swimming around, just ripping apart 30-pound bass. And I mean, I can't help but imagine that was due to improper handling by fishermen. I think a healthy fish that hasn't been caught by a fisherman is going to be able to outswim a seal, but one that's just been on somebody's line for 10 minutes, held out of the water for pictures, not released properly, and just barely kicks off or floats off, like you unfortunately see a lot at the canal. I think those are the fish that are getting eaten by the seals. So something to keep in mind.
Whew, about time.
So this is the most important part of the whole process. The way that you handle the fish, release it, revive it. You'll notice that I left the fish in the water. Its gills are fully submerged right now. It's just catching its breath while I get my measuring tape out. So often you see the first thing that people do when they land their fish, they just grab the fish, they throw it up on the rocks, they throw it on the the seaweed down there completely out of the water, which is just the worst thing for it at this point. The fish is at its it's pretty tired right now. It's the most tired it's going to be in the whole process. There's no rush. It's okay to let the fish catch its breath for a second while you get your measuring tape out or your camera, whatever. But there's no rush. The well-being of the fish, especially if it's a fish you have to release. This one is way over slot, as we're going to see in a minute. Just take your time with it. There's no rush. And you might have noticed the first thing I did when I took out my measuring tape there was I dunked it underwater, and that's so that when I lay the fish on it, it's not just being laid on a completely dry surface that's going to mess up its slime coat. In today's fishing world, one thing I see a lot is people that they just don't care. Maybe they don't know how important a fish's slime coat is. That's like our layer of skin. That slime coat is their first and most important, really, layer of defense against parasites, infection. So it's really important that we take care of the fish in that regard and help them try to keep as much of that slime coat intact as possible when we're handling them.
Would you be able to take a picture for me in a second? I'm gonna walk them up there. Thank you. Thank you.
So if you're gonna take a fish out of the water that you have to release, that you plan to release, you should have a plan in mind before you take it out of the water. Every second counts.
I gotta get him on something
when
flat
you're
real
dealing
quick.
with a tired fish that you just caught. So like I asked that kid to the right of me if he could take a picture. He's like, yeah, sure. But all of a sudden the fish started, breaking the surface right in front of us. So I'm not about to be like, oh, hey kid, can you stop fishing actually and get a picture for me? That's just bad etiquette. So all you got to do, just set your phone up against something. Fortunately here I had a power line pole. Just set your phone on video, face it towards you, and you can grab a screenshot later. It works well in all kinds of environments. I've leaned it up against jetty rocks. You can lean it up against your reel if you lay your rod down flat. You can figure it out.
Yeah, I gotta put it back in the water though.
Yeah, no, I know.
As fast as I gotta make sure it lives.
And this is such an important part of the release process that I see so many fishermen just completely disregard, is the revival. This one actually went pretty quick. This fish was ready to go, but you see so many people just after their photo shoot and weighing the fish and whatever, holding it out of the water for 5 minutes, they just plop it back in the water, no revival whatsoever, and the fish just floats off downstream or barely kicks off, and it's like, what do you think's about to happen to that fish in this canal loaded with gray seals and sharks and all that? This fish took off pretty quick. It was ready to go. I think, fighting fish quickly helps. Heavy drag, like I mentioned earlier, minimizing time out of the water, and hold on to the fish until it's ready to go. I mean, the fish will let you know when he's ready to go. It'll be kicking hard. His fins will be up. It'll be obvious. So there's no rush there. The fish will let you know.
Come on, get it.
And this is a couple hours later. I took a ride down to the east end of the canal. It's almost 9 a.m. at this point. The sun is high. It's hot. I hadn't seen any action in quite a while, so I was very happy to find this small group of surface-breaking fish. I dropped the bike, run down, make a cast, and I was able to hook up on my second cast out there. Nothing huge here. It looked like mostly slot-sized fish, but after a couple dozen casts with no action, I was just happy to hook up here on top again. Normally I wouldn't measure a fish this size, but I was just curious because I haven't measured a slot-sized fish in a long time, and I just got this awesome new measuring tape from NLBN, so I was just curious. You hear people all the time, oh yeah, it was a slot, it was a 40, but people don't often actually put fish on tape measures, so I was just curious. It ended up being a slot right around 29 inches.
29.
And again, you might have noticed I left that fish in the water until I got my measuring tape out, my pliers out. There's no rush to just immediately yank the fish out of the water as soon as you get it, landed. The fish isn't going anywhere if you just have it, laying right up against the shoreline. You can leave its gills underwater. Even with these smaller fish with short fight times, it's still important that we take care of them. They're the future of the fishery. And this one obviously didn't need much of a revival. He was ready to go. And that would be it for me this trip. Only a handful of fish this time, but it beats what we got going on Long Island right now. So thanks for watching.